Hello fellow makeup lovers, how are you guys doing? Today we're going to be doing our makeup together and chatting about why you should not buy from indie brands. And yes, I'm serious. No, this is not a joke. I really wanted to sit down and just discuss all of the reasons and the times when maybe purchasing from an indie makeup brand is not worth it. Y'all know on my channel, I am always talking about indie brands, always reviewing them, but that doesn't mean that I think that they're for everyone all the time in every situation. I am going to be playing with some newer makeup to my collection. I thought we could do a look with the Adept Cosmetics Flying Fiddles palette. I know I promised y'all that I was going to have a multiple looks video up a few days ago, but I ended up having a death in my family this weekend, and I'm okay, but I was just kind of in a weird headspace and I just didn't really feel like filming. I figured that we could play with it today and just discuss when indie makeup is just not worth it. So let's jump on in. I always forget what this is called, but I'm starting off with my Say Beauty Star Glow. I think this is like luminizing gel or serum gel or something like that. But I'm just going to throw that on my skin for a little extra glow. I did already moisturize really well this morning, so I've got a lot of hydration going on. So I feel like the reason why an indie makeup brand might not be worth it for you is the fact that unless you're buying from a bigger retailer, because sometimes, you know, indie brands do make it into Sephora or Ulta, Target, such and such, but in general, if you're purchasing from them, there is no returns, no refunds, unless like something is broken, no exchanges, like that's just not happening. It's just because they can't afford it the way that bigger brands can. I'm going in with the Haus Labs foundation in the shade Fair Warm, which is a little bit wrong for me. So I'm going to add in some of the Auric Glow Lust in the shade Pyrite just to add a little bit more bronziness, some glow, and maybe make it a little bit closer to my skin tone. I do feel like in general, when you're purchasing from indie brands, it requires a bit more research. And this could depend on where you're from, because I know that a lot of people who are outside of the US, you don't have refunds either way, or not refunds. You don't have returns really. If you don't like something, you're kind of stuck with it. In the US, we are definitely very spoiled to where if you buy a makeup product and it's the wrong shade or you just don't like it, you can return it. So I guess this con is a little bit more US based, but if you're used to being able to return things, you might have to adjust your perspective a little bit. You're definitely going to want to research more before you purchase something and make sure that it's good quality, that it is on par with your needs and what you like out of a product. Not that that's not always important to be an informed consumer and, you know, not wasting your money. But here I feel like it's just a little bit emphasized, especially I would say with face products, anything complexion wise. I feel like it's so much more a leap of faith because there is no going in store, there's no samples, there's no swatching it out and making sure that it works for you ahead of time, which I feel like can definitely be a very valid reason to not buy a foundation or a concealer or a powder from an indie brand, because you get the shade and it's wrong, you're kind of shit out of luck. And that really, really sucks, especially if you're on a very tight, strict budget. Even me, like I literally do this for a living and I get anxiety when I'm having to pick out a shade for something I know I cannot return. Like, this is it. I better get it right the first time. The way that a product looks can really vary from photo to photo. So yeah, I think that's a super, super valid reason to be hesitant to purchase from indie brands. I think with eyeshadow palettes, it's a little bit easier because you kind of know what you're getting and like you don't have to have it so perfectly fitted for you. I also think that if you have sensitive skin, it might make you a little bit more wary of buying from an indie brand. Again, same thing. You go to Sephora, you spend $45 on a foundation. It looks beautiful, you love it, but then you start breaking out in hives. No problem. Just go return it. Like, you don't have to keep it. You can get that $45 back. But if it's from a smaller indie brand, not in a big retailer, there's only minimal things you can do. Like maybe you can reach out to customer service, maybe, but majority of brands have pretty strict guidelines that say like no returns, nothing whatsoever. Y'all, this combo looks so good. That actually matches my skin pretty perfectly. I actually did purchase another shade of this to have the right shade so I can try it without mixing. But right there, I am not mad at that one bit. I will say though that from everything I've seen, if you purchase a palette or something and it comes broken, brands will do their best to replace it or give you a partial refund, do something to make it right. I feel like the product arriving damaged is definitely different than other things. Okay, just doing a tiny, tiny little bit of spot concealing with my Glossier Stretch Concealer, which actually looks to be like the perfect shade for me right now. So another time when indie makeup just might not be worth it for you is if you are someone who doesn't have patience, you want to buy your product and you want it to be here now, because I feel like in general with indie brands, that's just not the case. There are some that I've tried that ship really fast. For example, GlamLite, the Betty Boop palette I purchased on launch. I think that was Friday last week, and it got here yesterday on Wednesday. So it was less than a week. It was really fast. But there's also a lot of indie brands that have pre-orders or that have processing times that are like 14 to 21 business days. And when you make your purchase, it's gonna take a minute for them to get it out. And I do feel like in some ways, like bigger brands that are able to ship and like get things out really, really, really fast, like Amazon, for example, is kind of ruining it for some of the smaller dogs in the game, because, you know, like there's so many people who are like, oh, like I want to buy from an indie brand, but it's going to take a month to get to me. And it's like, oh, I can buy like just this cheap random product from Amazon and it gets to me in one day. So it's like you get a little spoiled with that. You get a little spoiled with the like, I want it now, here it is. And with indie, you have to wait a little bit more. So for me personally, this one I relate to a little bit less because I think I have decent patience. Like I've waited months for pre-orders and I was fine. Like I was like, when it gets to me, it gets to me. Like I'm still excited, but I know that everyone is different, and like you might be the person who's just constantly like waiting for your order to ship, like emailing the brand every single day. If that is you, maybe you and indie makeup don't match, or definitely do your research. Look at every brand, look at their processing time, look at all of their pre-orders and make sure that you're comfortable with what they're doing. And also there are times when I've seen brands do pre-orders that took much longer than they said it was going to, and I could see that being another like really big turnoff too. But then I've also seen Adept Cosmetics, for example. I feel like they are the absolute best at pre-orders. They'll say like, oh, this is shipping the first week of April, and then they have it shipped like the third week of March. Like it's always better to be pleasantly surprised than to be disappointed. So I really, really appreciate that about Adept Cosmetics. It does at times require some patience. And on top of that, free shipping, it's not always gonna happen. It's not the same. It's not Amazon. Like they don't have these major deals with shipping companies to be able to offer free shipping. It's just a small business. That's what they're paying for shipping. Would it be ridiculous to go in with more pyrite for my bronzer? It's just such a good shade. I love this so much. Don't get me wrong, I'm still the person who will go out of my way and like spend a little bit more to get free shipping. But sometimes there are brands where even if you're spending $100, you still have to pay for shipping. Like that's just what it is. And I'm kind of used to it, so I don't really bat my eye unless it's like super expensive. Like for example, Ensley Reign Cosmetics, it was like $16 for the cheapest shipping, and it's domestic. Only one product that I was purchasing, so I thought that was a little bit expensive, but paying $8 to $10 for most orders is pretty normal. Oh no, I forgot I wanted to use color corrector with the Haus Labs concealer just to try it out. But I did use this by itself and it looks really pretty. I like it way more with the foundation being the right shade than I liked it when I just tried the foundation by itself because it's a little too light for me. I have a full first impression, like trying Haus Labs for the first time. I'll make sure to link that down below for you. But I'm like kind of obsessed with how my base makeup looks right now. Let's just go in with blush because I can't help it. I have the Say Beauty blush in Baby, which is such a pretty pink, and the wear time on this was so good. I'm gonna do little dots. She's very pigmented and she is glowy, which makes me unexplainably happy. So another time when indie brands just might not be worth it. And this one, I feel like it really depends on the brand, and there are big brands that have unprofessional customer service and they get away with it 100%. So I feel like it could happen no matter how small or how big the brand is. But sometimes, every once in a while, there's an indie brand that will take orders and then you basically have to like track them down and stalk them and send them emails over and over again and hound them to get your order, which is just unacceptable. I know I've gotten comments from you guys that that's happened to you. I've also had that experience myself a little while back. It's been a few years, but there was an indie brand that I really wanted to try. I'd heard good things about. And I placed an order and then I was just like waiting and waiting and waiting, like, yo, where is my order? And eventually like I commented on their Instagram and was like, where's my order? Like, I've emailed you, like it's been months. And then they started deleting my comments. And eventually I did speak to the owner and got it all figured out and they were really apologetic. They said they'd been going through some things, but it's just really, really unprofessional. And I don't know that happens with Sephora. Things go wrong, but I think it happens more often with indie brands. I also think that sometimes the customer service can be a little bit more, not always as just like neutral, because a lot of times the person who owns the brand is also the person who's doing customer service. Highly, highly recommend hiring someone for customer service as soon as you can, because a lot of owners treat their brands like their babies. So when you message and you're like, oh, I didn't like this, or like this went wrong, they're like, why are you attacking my baby? But it's not a baby, it's a business. So I do feel like sometimes you're more often to have attitude or sassiness with indie brands because there is like a little bit more personal whatnot going on. But on the flip side, like that personal touch can be beautiful. Like nobody at Sephora is like jumping up and down when you buy their makeup. But when you buy from a small brand, like you're helping them pay the bills and fulfill their dream and maybe save up for their kids' college. Like you don't know that like you're actually making a difference for someone and not just putting more money in like a super rich CEO's pocket. Do you know what I mean? So there is like a beauty to it, but at the same time, I've definitely heard some horror stories. I've heard some brand owners that probably should have hired customer service to be a little bit more neutral, to just take care of things without feeling like they're being attacked. I just feel like when you don't have a PR team, you're just more likely to look like an ass. Bigger brands have people who specifically their whole job is to make you look good. And smaller brands just don't typically have that. Using this nude stick concealer pencil in Light 1, I talked about this in my concealer declutter and I said I was going to try to use it more. So just adding a little bit of brightness underneath my brows. I kind of touched on it a little bit, but I feel like if you're on a budget, if you like cannot spend more than drugstore prices on makeup, like that's totally fine. I feel like when I am talking and doing my reviews and I'm hyping up indie brands, obviously I'm reviewing it for everyone. But when I'm saying, oh, like I would rather buy this than this, a lot of times I'm talking about something at Sephora, something at Ulta, something that's on the same price point or even more expensive. I've definitely been there where all of the makeup I could afford to buy was Wet n Wild or e.l.f. and there's nothing wrong with that. And at that point of your life, just getting what makeup you can afford, you don't need to worry about what brands you're buying from. I do feel like a lot of indie brands are putting out better products than drugstore or than high-end makeup or even some luxury makeup, just depending. I think for comparison's sake, like if you can walk into Sephora and buy any eyeshadow palette, then yeah, I'm gonna sit here and rave and say like you should try some indie brands. But if you're like, the most I can spend on an eyeshadow palette is $20, then maybe not every indie brand is going to be worth it for you. Like these super expensive like special shadows, like they're still beautiful, they're still amazing. But if they're not in your budget, then obviously it's not worth it. Like you just have to do what works for you and make good decisions on your own behalf, you know? So that's another time when it may or may not be worth it. It's just depending on your budget and what you feel comfortable spending, because not everyone wants to spend $50+ on an eyeshadow palette. But like I said, if you're someone who loves to buy eyeshadow palettes, you buy everything that Natasha Denona comes out with, then like please listen to my recommendations. I can give you some really good ones. I feel like that's enough negativity. I could not leave this video letting it be only why indie brands aren't worth it. So I figured let's switch over and let's talk about all the reasons when they are worth it, or like what makes them extra special. I did go in with the Divina Eye Base Primer. It's in the shade Prelusion. I think maybe I'm gonna go a little bit more rosy with this look. So I'm gonna start off with the shade Tan Toffee Rose. It's funny to me because sometimes I do get called like biased, especially when I was talking about Pat McGrath eyeshadows in comparison to indie eyeshadows, and I was talking about which ones I feel like are on par or better. And I got some comments like, oh, you're so biased, like you just like the indie makeup more because it's indie makeup, yada yada. And I get where people are coming from when they say that. Obviously you can tell I love indie makeup and we all have our biases, but the truth is when I walk into Ulta or Sephora, I'm not impressed by the eyeshadows. Like, if you love eyeshadow, I cannot emphasize enough how much you need to try indie eyeshadows. They're just so much better. And I love going in my local Ulta, my local Sephora is like not the nicest. Everything's always missing, but you know, I still go there from time to time. But I'll swatch new palettes. I swatched some Patrick Ta eyeshadows. Last time I was in Ulta, I swatched the new Anastasia Cosmos palette, and I was just like, I don't want to buy this. Like, it's just not as good as what I have at home. Like, yeah, like maybe the color stories are pretty, and I'm not even really talking about the color stories. I get that if you're going into, you know, a mainstream store, you're gonna find a little bit more neutral. You're gonna find a little bit softer tones because that's what's gonna sell better to the masses. I get that 100%, but I'm just talking about the quality. Like, the quality is just not the same. And it's not like that for other products. Like, I'll go into Ulta and I'll pick up new blushes, new concealers, new foundation. I'm excited to try everything. And there's been many a times where I get home and I'm like, oh, I want to film like a try on haul. And I'm like, wait, I don't have anything for my eyes. And I always end up pulling something that I already have in my collection just to complete the look. But I don't know, it's just the truth. I'm just not impressed. On my notes, I have worth it. And then in all caps, I have eyeshadow always. It's just how I feel. Okay, so I think I'm gonna go into just a little bit of the shade Sahara to deepen this. A lot of times, indie brands will have more innovative formulas and color stories because they're able to produce things at a much faster rate than a brand that's in Sephora or Ulta. Normally, you're talking like a year and a half, maybe 2 years between the time that you decide to put out a product and when it actually gets put out. So right now, you're seeing more and more multi-chromes from brands that you can buy in Sephora and Ulta, and everyone who's been purchasing indie makeup knows that multi-chromes have already been it for a hot minute. But that's just because indie makeup is typically ahead of the game when it comes to things like that. For example, right now, what's really hot in indie makeup is holographic shadows. I have not seen a single one that you can purchase from Sephora or Ulta, but I'm sure give it another year, a year or two, and we're gonna be seeing it. The line, my lash line with that too. It's just such a pretty brown. Like, so unexpected for Adept, but I'm into it. So yeah, indie brands just in general are a little bit more trendy. I just realized that I did already mention one of my main points here for why I love to support indie brands, and I mentioned it earlier, but it's just basically what I was saying about how it makes a real person happy and a real person cares that you purchase from them, and there's just like this like feel good factor about it, which I feel like you feel as a consumer, but also for me as someone who's reviewing makeup. And like, I feel like sometimes when you're talking about other brands, like I could talk about how much I'm enjoying House Labs all day long, and it's kind of just like talking to the void. It's fine. Like, I'm so happy that you guys are hearing me, but I'm saying, like, as far as brand relations go, like House Labs doesn't care what I think because I'm not a huge influencer. But when you're talking about smaller brands then you get to have more of that like relationship, and you get to actually hear like, thank you so much for what you're doing. Thank you for talking about my products. Like, you made a difference in my life. And that's so cool. Like, that's so awesome. Okay, I think I'm gonna go into a little bit of the shade Honey Splurge, which is the lightest shade in the palette. Kind of like a yellowy, beigey light tone. And I'm just gonna add that in my inner corner. Ooh. These are a little bit more traditional feeling eyeshadows versus what Adept normally does, but look how good that's applying with a brush. Like, it makes sense for a neutral palette from Adept to be a little bit more simple, a little bit easier to use, especially with a brush. Their website still says these are best applied with a finger, but that looks really good. I think lastly, maybe, should we go in with one of like the light multi-chromes? This one right here. I'm gonna use that to fill in the rest of the lid that's open and maybe blend into that lighter tone a little bit. Super pretty. I know I said I was going more rosy, but the shimmers kind of took me on a different path. I also feel like another reason why indie products in general stand out is because obviously the owners want to make money. Like, let's be real, it's a business at the end of the day. Like, they have a dream, they have a product they want to put out, like they want to do well for themselves. Everyone does. But I think that there is more passion. It's not just a like, let me make this and make whatever's gonna sell best. I don't feel like that's the vibe. And I feel like that does contribute to indie products being more innovative. Like, for example, the Finding Ferdinand Adjuster blushes, where they had like a really cool shade and a really warm shade they did in collaboration with Khaki. You've got chilled or cozy, and whatever blush you're wearing, if you want it to be just a smidge warmer, a smidge cooler, then you have that. And that is so cool, so unique, so innovative. And what mainstream brand is doing that? I can't think of anyone, but I think that's because there's passion and there's heart and there's knowledge and there's love for makeup behind the products. It's not just, oh, like, let me make another neutral blush, a pink blush, an orange blush, and a red blush, and it's gonna sell. Like, that's what people are gonna buy, just the same old, which I think is more common in Ulta or Sephora. Like, if you look at the blush lines, look at the blush shades that are available. You're gonna see a lot of the same shades, a lot of the same tones over and over and over again. But then you look at indie brands and there's unique tones, there's unique shades, there's just things you wouldn't have even thought of. Like, it's the passion. Like, the passion is there and it makes a difference. Kind of obsessed with how the look is turning out. I think it's super, super cute. I am gonna go into the new Blend Bunny Lash Perfecting Omni Lash Mascara. Really enjoying this. Super fluffy. I did do a little YouTube short trying this out in case you wanna watch that. Just gonna throw it on real quick. And I mean, I guess I can talk while I do this. Like, normally I just skip through my mascara, but you can see how it applies. You can see, like, even just for one coat, it looks so, so good. It's kind of giving better than sex. Another little plus is that even though it's more expensive than drugstore makeup, you can pretty much always find a discount. I feel like there's so many indie brands that always have affiliate codes or sales. Mostly affiliate codes, I think there's a lot more of, versus like bigger brands. Like, unless they are having a sale, you can't always find a discount code. But I feel like for majority of the brands, like, you guys know, I have a lot of codes. Like, you can use AMYLOVES on most indie brand websites and save a little bit of money. But I think that's awesome. I think that it's really, really nice that if you're doing the research to find if this product is going to work for you or not, and you find someone who helps you, then you can help them out a little bit and save some. Even though it's not drugstore pricing, even though there are some things that get a little expensive, you can pretty much not have to pay full price, which is definitely a plus. At least it was to me when I was writing this list. I cannot tell you guys how excited I am to have a good indie mascara. Like, I'm so happy. Look how pretty that is. That is one coat. It's fluffy. It's dark. It's luscious. Like, it's being advertised as just a good mascara. I would call it a great mascara, in my humble opinion. Like, it looks so beautiful. And at this point, like, I love trying mascaras, I really do, but just to have a solid one from an indie brand that I love, I'm like, I could honestly see just repurchasing this and the Finding Ferdinand mascara over and over again and just living my best life. And my lips are definitely feeling a little bit dry, so I'm just gonna go into the Sigma lip oil in the shade Tranquil. Wait, no, this is the one where the wand broke and I was never able to get it out. Okay, I'm gonna go into the We Makeup Lip Gloss in the shade 05. Mentioned this in my January favorites, and the doe foot wand is still there, so can't complain. All right, y'all, so here is the finished look. I love how it turned out, especially the eyeshadow, the Flying Fiddles palette. I could see it being such a good one for neutral lovers. If you just love true neutral looks, like this is super, super cute. I really hope that you guys enjoyed the topic of today's video. I would love to have a conversation with you down below of times when you think that indie brands aren't worth it or times that they are. I'd be so curious to hear all of your opinions on this. I hope that I did the topic justice, and if you are new here, I would be so happy to have you again. Please hit that subscribe button if you'd like to see more content around independently owned makeup brands. I do have a whole like playlist I made a little while back, but it's basically like a starter like guide to trying indie makeup, talking about how to not get caught up in wholesale, which, you know what, I probably should have talked about that. Sometimes that does happen with indie makeup, but I'll just leave that video for you to check out in that playlist. I'll see you guys again very soon. Bye.